I think it's incredibly important to really take a step back, think through purpose and the value that you'll be producing for your customer, not your business necessarily. That should be a byproduct. And that could be down to trying to really test and iterate on the job that you'll be hired to do, and actually on the converse of that, fired for not doing. So just being aware along each stage to think, who is this for? Who is it not for? Because typically people will think, well, let's just try and get as many people as possible. Disqualification is important. Secondly, what problem do we believe that this will solve? And then test and iterate on that problem being important enough for the customer base. And then how are we actually going to solve it? And that's obviously then the part of this conversation that will open up to the data side of things. But what that means is, if you're thinking about the problems that your customers have, you start to find out more about them rather than you. And I think what I'll tend to see as a symptom of stuff going wrong is if people start pre-selling, they're thinking about features, they're thinking about revenue, they're thinking about the budgets, the P&Ls. They're already kind of locked into this thing as almost as if it exists already. Secondly, I'd be thinking about how the data itself works, not in isolation, but what should happen before your customer sees that data, like during that interaction with it and afterwards. So during the testing side of things, working out how does this fit into a workflow, not just neatly, it magically appears on someone's desk, but actually what happens in their day. But also, where does that data, how does it get transformed, and who gets to see it next? And why is that important to their company? And if you can try and get to the point where you're thinking through, okay, let's think about the customer base that it is for, and the people in that customer base that will typically be using this as the core user, then you can begin to think about how to activate that usage within the first, let's say, 10 days of subscribing, because all the data points towards the first 10 days as being critical. Anything after that, and you'll get churn, and then you wonder why there's an issue with your data platform. So it's those aha moments that are really important to model in. Something you'll hear me say pretty much anytime I'm in a conversation like this is the importance of asking, if you were to use this service now, or actually you are using this service now, how must-have is this? Is critical, because not just for the number, that's of interest if you track it consistently over time, but the follow-on question is, what would we need to do to improve that score, or what would we need to do to keep that score? And that's when you start finding out either product improvements or sometimes really unexpected competitors that are producing stuff that you didn't know about, or things like service improvements. So that must-have question will give you a real perspective from a customer base point of view, not a product feature point of view. The kind of things that I see that get in the way of this, and I've probably already touched on that, is almost the status quo of B2B subscriptions. It feels like it's great to have control and P&Ls and budget lines and all that kind of stuff, but we're hardwired to need to plan and control and budget, and that leads to stuff that, if you think of getting a data product into a customer organization, you've got to think, I think, of it as almost entering into the immune system and working through, how am I going to not get rejected by my customer's immune system? And that's not helped if you've got a CFO or otherwise beating down the door to just get the data out there and sold. The second is there's a tendency to shortcut discovery and testing and iteration because of business as usual. So if you hear words, or you hear yourself saying stuff like, well, we've done so much research already, or our customers have got survey fatigue, or we just can't reach the target customer that we thought would use this, so we're just going to fill up the interview slots with other people, you're already designing a problem and failure into your data product. And then there's the third bit, which is just happy ears. I think I've heard what I needed to hear, and I think I'm going to just go ahead and build this thing. And those things are really important to try and be aware of and then model out. There's value in knowing if your customer base won't talk to you, or your salespeople can't reach that target customer, or if there are barriers within a customer's organization that you didn't know existed yet. But it's always so tempting to think it's okay, we'll plow on and we'll just deal with it as it comes. So I think that's that's a lot of experience of stuff that's not gone so well, and also some, I hope, steer towards what can go well.
Yeah, it's really helpful, Annie, because I know you've consulted on a huge number of product launches and advised people. So that's really, really helpful, and getting an awful lot around client dialogue for sure, and visualizing how exactly it's going to land, how exactly it's going to work, being quite precise about that. And the bit you mentioned earlier on about who it's not for, who the product is not for, is kind of unusual. And is that to stop the product becoming too vague or too nebulous? Is that why you mentioned both who your target is and who your target is not?
And just understanding. So when I see stuff that leads to scope creep or feature, just adding the kitchen sink, is because people have said, well, we've done our research and we found out from lots and lots of customers about what they need, and the answer is just one size fits all fits nobody. So actually understanding and being very, like, tightening the net from the beginning. You can always expand and grow from that, but
Mm.
actually understanding who this is for is really important, I think. And if when I go into teams, it's always telling to me, if I say who's the customer, you rarely get cross-functional teams that can agree on that, even though they've had the same customer base for years, right? So if you're just designing something that you hope is uh, for everybody, it's already feeling like you're modeling in some failure.